The Irishman was directed by Martin Scorsese and stars Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, Al Pacino, Jesse Plemons, and Ray Romano, and is the story of a hitman for the mob who recalls his possible involvement with the murder of Jimmy Hoffa. I finally got a chance to see this movie. It's been in LA and New York theaters, I guess, since the 1st of November. It's going to be at Netflix pretty soon, but it finally came to Cleveland. I got to see it in an early showing. It's a Scorsese film with De Niro, Pesci, and Pacino. It's mesmerizing. It's 3.5 hours long, and that runtime is going to be discussed frequently because that's really fucking long. And although there are some scenes that drag a little bit early on, I would say the movie felt more like it was 2 hours, 45 minutes maybe. There's a good 45 minutes just lost in translation because the film is constantly riveting. Because of the talent on screen, because of the talent behind the camera, this movie moves way faster than any 3.5 hour movie with a lot of talking than I've ever seen. In fact, that's something I loved about it. This is a movie that likes to meditate on its characters. It really likes to ponder how they're feeling. It allows them to sit and not say anything for extended periods of time. The movie has sequences that are just filled with silence and moments that really feel tense as a result. A lot of films have forgotten to just let their characters think on screen. It's almost like film has become radio. The thing in radio is that you don't want any dead air. You don't want any silence because then people are looking at the radio like it's fucking broken. And a lot of movies have become that now. Like, we're not allowed to just have people thinking or coming up with ideas or planning. That's always really fascinating when you have a bunch of actors like these guys on screen. Watching them figure things out, watching them scheme how to get their way into a situation or how to one-up the other person. It's a fascinating movie as a story because the story of Jimmy Hoffa is pretty well known for a lot of people from a certain generation, and now it's kind of become mythic. So the movie automatically has a mystique to it because of this story surrounding these events. But it's also fascinating in that you're looking at these actors, and so there's that added benefit to anyone who's a film buff or anyone who appreciates film at all. You're going to look at this movie and see the talent on screen, and automatically there's going to be some attachment to it. So the movie has that writing for it, and I tried my best to keep that out of my mind and actually just focus on the filmmaking. And because of how great everyone in this movie is, and because of how well directed and edited, especially Thelma Schoonmaker, Jesus Christ, what an editor. Because of all of that, these A-list legends disappeared, and I found myself watching these characters. Robert De Niro is the best that he has been in years, as is Al Pacino, and obviously Joe Pesci, who doesn't really work that much anymore. He's basically retired at this point. They all give excellent performances, and it's so great to see actors of this caliber in such a good movie, because some of them have been in some real crap as of the past few years, and so it's just wonderful to see that when you have the right person behind the screen and everyone's really present and ready to make a great movie, that these guys can still knock it out of the park. The movie will no doubt be compared to Goodfellas because it's also a mob film. Many of the cast members from that film are in this movie, and of course it's the same director, so those comparisons are apt, and I guess it's fair, but it's different in one very specific way. Goodfellas to me was always about excess. Those guys in that movie, they lived like kings. They were surrounded by money and women and power and all the food they could ever want, and nobody could touch them. And the movie was very fast-paced in that way. It was like this adrenaline-fueled insanity. But this film is different, and I wouldn't use the word slower. It's more of a subtle dissection of its characters. This movie wants to know what's on the mind of everyone there. And it's not trying to be too flashy with elaborate cuts and camera work. It's the type of movie that someone would make who is trying to be a little older and a little wiser. And I gotta say, out of the 5 guys who exploded out of the 70s, Brian De Palma, Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, Francis Ford Coppola, and Martin Scorsese, he has retained the most vitality in his filmography. He's rarely had a misstep. There's an energy, a voice, and an originality to his movies that he's never lost. All these years later, he's still making films that are this investing and this exciting to watch, even though so much of it really is just guys kind of hanging out and talking. Sure, there's your sudden bursts of Scorsese bloody violence that you come to expect in some of his films, but a lot of the movie is really quiet intimidation, especially from Joe Pesci, who's fucking masterful in this movie. You get the sense that if you crossed him in just the wrong way, he'd kill everyone in your family and wouldn't blink an eye. But he wouldn't just not blink an eye. he'd eat dinner afterwards and then take a shower and go to bed. Like, he's that cold in this movie. This is a perfect role for Pacino, especially in his first collaboration with Scorsese, because he gets to play this big, larger-than-life figure who yells and likes to be really emphatic, and that's something that Al Pacino is really good at. He can be over the top, but it's the type of over the top that I want. You know, when I see Nicolas Cage fucking lose his mind in a movie, it excites me. When I see Al Pacino scream and slam a table and point his finger at everyone in the room, cursing at all of them, that's what I want to see. That makes me very happy. And De Niro shows a considerable amount of restraint in the role, to the point where his lines really don't feel scripted. They roll out of his mouth as if he's just walked onto the set and he's improvising with all the actors. It's obviously scripted, but he has such a way of reading his lines that they never feel that way. His presence is just fucking dynamic in every scene. And yet he's never asking for the attention with this role. The de-aging was something I was concerned about as well, because I was afraid it was going to be distracting, but after a few scenes, I didn't even notice it anymore. It was really phenomenal. And there's actually a point where they reach a certain age for their characters where I couldn't tell. Like, I was like, is that how they are now in real life, or have they blended it a little bit? Like, it's that seamless. It's really impressive work. The film also has a lot on its mind, especially towards its final moments, which I won't ruin for you if you haven't seen it yet, but there's a lot of discussion that can be had just from the final shot alone, especially when you think about things that happened earlier in the movie relating to a similar moment. And it really makes your brain just go through all these different ideas, because you can look at this final moment that we have in the movie in like a lot of different ways, surprisingly. And there's a lot that can be said from just this one image. It's one of my favorite final shots I've seen in a long time. Anna Paquin is in the film as an older version of De Niro's daughter. We see her a lot more often when she's younger, and she has more screen time there, the character. But Anna Paquin, as an older version of this character, doesn't have a lot of screen time. But she becomes very integral to De Niro's arc. And since we didn't have quite enough with her character, I thought that arc didn't have the strength or the impact that it could have had. That's pretty much my only real glaring issue with the movie. I will say this, though. This movie has a 20-minute sequence that's maybe the most suspenseful sequence I've seen in a movie all year. There's just this really long and detailed build-up. And it's exactly what I've been begging more directors to do. You know, like, there's the big difference between, like, the big action scene or the big drama scene and then this really long sequence that just has this build-up and payoff with a bunch of scenes interwoven that all just feel like this big moment that could be its own little short film. There's about a 20-25 minute part of this movie that just was white-knuckled. I'm going to give The Irishman an A. This movie really made me happy. I felt like I was watching a real film, and I haven't felt that way too much this year, save for Parasite and The Lighthouse, and I really did love Dr. Sleep, and you should see it. It's not making enough money. I loved it. If you can get to a theater that has it, try to see it on the big screen. I really do think it's worth it. Guys, thank you so much as always for watching. Look forward to more reviews very soon, and if you like this, you can click right here and get Stuckmanized.